Okay, so now without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's first speaker, Jason McGrath, Executive Vice President with our Ipsos Corporate Reputation Practice. Jason, you have the floor.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you join us today to talk about ESG. As mentioned, my name is Jason McGrath, and I lead the U.S. Corporate Reputation Practice here at Ipsos, helping global companies understand stakeholder perceptions of the organization and understand what drives trust and how they can impact it in a positive way. I'm joined today by my colleague Andre Galliano, partner with Strategy 3, as well as Ana Laura Sivieri, Global Corporate Marketing and Communications Director at Braskem. Both Andre and Ana will introduce themselves more thoroughly at the beginning of each of their sections, respectively. Our agenda for today we'll cover first an introduction and a discussion of the context around ESG, expectations from global citizens today, how companies are performing against some of those expectations, and how ESG leaders at global companies see the impact of these types of programs on their reputation overall. We'll then talk about the purpose of profit, from purpose to profit, and understanding the economics of ESG and how we can attach an actual value to ESG initiatives and programs. And lastly, we'll close out with a case study by our guest, Ana. And of course, we're happy to take questions at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to talk a little bit about the context of ESG. And to start, we conduct at Ipsos a study called our What Worries the World program. Ultimately, what we're exploring on a monthly basis is among global citizens across 29 countries, what are the top worries in their country? No surprise right now with the global economy the way it is that inflation is the #1 concern. But as we look further into the topics that we explore, we see that E, S, and G topics are ultimately bubbling up towards the top. Poverty and social inequality being identified by 30% of global citizens. Financial and political corruption mentioned by 27% of global citizens. And climate change making its way into the top 10 issues at 16%. An issue that here in the US we have seen grow multiple times over the past couple of years in terms of importance to citizens. These issues are not going away. These issues are things that we are seeing companies begin to tackle in a greater way, and things that we are seeing stakeholders expect from companies. The question, of course, is, can companies focus on these issues while still delivering financial returns that are expected of key stakeholders? And this is a topic that we also explored in our global trends study. And the answer is, of course, yes. 80% of global citizens agree that brands can make money and support good causes at the same time. This is not a zero-sum game. We hear this from our global citizens. We also hear this from some of our key clients and stakeholders who are ultimately responsible for managing the reputation of their organizations, that there is an expectation and an understanding that companies can still deliver profitable performance while addressing social good and the causes that stakeholders expect. Of course, we need to understand then, where is there a say-do gap? When we ask citizens globally, who do you expect to act? And this question, the data that you're looking at here, is specifically with regard to taking action to help improve the environment and to help fight climate change. What you see is that the expectations are that government will take the lead on acting against climate change and environmental improvement, followed by citizens and consumers, individual responsibility for having an impact, and third is private companies at 41%. However, you'll also see there is a significant gap in terms of perceptions of how these groups or individuals are acting. You see a 30-point gap for government, a recognition that they need to act in these areas, but only 33% indicating that governments are acting, are taking action to improve environment and climate change. Citizens themselves rate themselves quite strongly, 41% indicating they are taking action, but you also see a 16-point gap for private companies, indicating there's an expectation, but not necessarily recognition of action currently being taken. And this is a challenge that companies need to work to address, to close this say-do gap and to demonstrate the actions that are being taken, not just on environmental issues, but also on social and governance issues. Now, through a study that we conduct each year called the Ipsos Reputation Council, a study where we speak to over 100 global chief communications officers and heads of corporate affairs to understand what are the trends, the challenges, and the issues in reputation management for their organizations. We find that ESG is growing in importance. And it's not just that it's become more important, but that it is fundamentally changing the way that businesses operate today. 55% of chief communications officers and corporate affairs leaders at the companies that we spoke with last year indicate that ESG is fundamentally changing the way business operates. However, you will see that there is still room for improvement here for ESG initiatives to become part of the DNA of an organization and how they operate. Particularly when you factor in the risks, we see the gap here. Does poor ESG performance now have material consequences for organizations? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. From our Reputation Council participants, 81% agree that poor ESG performance doesn't just pose reputational risk, it poses material consequences for the business. And in the most recent study that we've launched in the corporate reputation practice here at Ipsos, our ESG Council, speaking with 35 senior either chief sustainability officers at global organizations or leaders with responsibility for ESG performance at these organizations, we see clearly here that the perception is that a link exists between a company's ESG performance and its attractiveness to investors, as well as a company's ESG performance and the link to attractiveness as an employer. Particularly amongst employees, we see growing demand for companies to be taking action on these types of issues. Now, through our work with companies across industries, what we know from our reputation work is that ESG indicators are stronger drivers of trust now than they ever have been based on the expectations we see. And ultimately, there is value in the ESG initiatives that are being launched. The impact, what we see on the next slide here, is that Paul Pullman put it well when he was CEO of Unilever. The current market capitalization of the company was 130 billion euros, but asset value is only 30 billion. What's the balance? The balance is trust. And of course, there are many other intangibles in there, but the balance is reputation. And we see that more and more ESG initiatives, ESG performance and expectations are a stronger and stronger driver of trust today. And it takes a long time to build an organization's reputation, but it can be lost in a moment with missteps or crises, particularly around ESG issues, social issues that we're seeing taking center stage more and more so today. And so what we'll be talking about through the remainder of today's discussion is understanding the economics of ESG. So I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Andre, to talk specifically about the Ipsos approach to doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. And indeed, this is a very interesting topic, discussing the importance of ESG and understanding if ESG does generate financial value, right? And the first thing that I want to take a step back here, I ask in a number of social platforms, what is ESG? So what do we understand about ESG and how is ESG perceived by people? So the responses were very different. Typically, most of it is about impact, environment, some of the responses about social awareness, but typically people tend to think about ESG on more of an environmental issue, when it's not. It's much more than that. And we at Ipsos do believe that ESG, the strategy, the North Star for ESG lies in that sweet spot between prosperity, doing something better for the planet, for society, and for people. And the S component of ESG often gets forgotten, right? And when we talk about society, and when we talk about people, and we talk about diversity, another thing that gets forgotten is that it's not only diversity, is not only about race, it's not only about gender, but there are a number of other aspects that should be taken into account when we're discussing diversity, of course. So the context and the definition of ESG should be seen on a broader perspective, with a lens that captures more than just, of course, environment. And I know it's extremely urgent what we're facing right now in terms of environment. For instance, the heat wave that is just hitting the US and Europe, and everyone's so alarmed. And the public is alarmed as well. We're going to see a few other data that we're going to show. That's going to show a bit. Going to give some light on this topic. So ESG matters. We just seen with Jason some data that he shared. That of course it does matter. If we look at ESG from the consumer perspective, we are going to see that many consumers do think, of course, this is the Ipsos Global Trends. It's more than almost 50,000 interviews. So 80% think that we're heading for a environmental disaster if we don't change our habits, if we don't change what we're doing. And 64% are saying that they would be able to they will be willing to spend more if to buy products that act more responsibly. Of course, that's an intention that does not necessarily translate into behavior. We know that there's a gap there, but at least it's perceived as something important, as something urgent for consumers. If we expand this concept to the employee perspective, and Jason also showed evidence on that with the Ipsos Reputation Council, but this study here shows that 86% of workers feel proud when their employers' ESG goals are clear. So clearly, ESG may play a role in attracting and retaining talent, and this goes beyond just the consumer perspective, and this is what we should think about when thinking about the return on investments on ESG. And finally, if we see it from the business perspective, we can see that 90% of the Standard & Poor's 500 companies, 90% are publishing ESG reports in one way or the other. So, of course, if they're doing that, they understand that there's importance to share their practices to prove to the financial community, to their investors, that they are sustainable companies and they do believe in ESG. So we have three different perspectives that can easily prove to us that ESG matters. Now, the key question behind the discussion today, does it generate financial value? Because with all this evidence that we have, it might seem enough to convince our boards, our CFO or CEO to invest more on ESG, right? And then this is the final challenge. This is the final obstacle. So bridging the gap between marketing, ESG, and finance. Are we able to build a business case? Are we able to prove that there's financial return in ESG investments? And this is the question that we are going to help answer today. And we're going to see a case with Braskem that we developed an interesting approach to help them justify investments on ESG, on reputation. So yes, in our study and from our perspective, investing in ESG can generate financial value. This is one of the strong evidence that we have. So we built a fictional portfolio with the top 10 most influential brands. This is a ranking conducted by Ipsos that, among other things, considers empathy of a brand, the ability that a brand has to influence consumers' decision, focus on sustainability, etc., innovation and sustainable practices. So we created a fictional portfolio. It's a hypothetical portfolio, and we benchmarked that portfolio versus the S&P 500 over time, and we can see that the valorization of that fictional portfolio was that much higher than that one of the Standard & Poor's 500, which proves that these companies are generating more financial value. Now, is it possible to isolate the effect of ESG? And this is what we're going to prove next. And this is what we have developed at Ipsos, a methodology to understand and to isolate and to see the impact that ESG has on economic value. The first thing that we need to think of is the role of the initiative. Of course, ESG, on top of being an initiative that is essential for the planet, for prosperity, for people, and for everything we just discussed, it's also it could be seen, it has to be seen as a financial asset that can generate return. But if we succumb to the temptation to see ESG just from the sales perspective or the impact on sales, we might fall short on that analysis, because of course ESG is building background to the brand, is improving brand equity, but it's not necessarily correlated to increase in sales. On the other hand, internet search, social media, in-store ads, of course, they are much more correlated to sales. And if we were just thinking of making the sale, we might be tempted to put all of our money in those three initiatives. And of course, we wouldn't be successful, because we need to build background as well. We need to build equity, and that is on the longer term. And that is why we need to bring the long term into the perspective. So if this chart shows clearly that if we're looking at the short term, we're going to see at a given period of time, if we see the period of time that we're doing ESG investments, for instance, and we just look at impact on sales in that short term, that will not be enough to justify those investments, because once we are doing ESG investments, we are impacting brand equity, we are impacting reputation, and that might not have, as I said, impact directly on sales. If we're just thinking of sales, maybe we could even decrease our prices, we would have a spike in sales, right? And you can see that in the chart, but that wouldn't be sustainable, because as soon as we practice the same prices that we were practicing before, the sales would drop. That means that it's not a sustainable strategy. Whereas if I am improving our brand equity, our reputation, I am improving future cash flows, and this is why we need to look into future cash flows more than we look into sales. We need to keep sales into perspective, but we need to look at the residual effect that an investment might have into future value generation. And this is how corporate finance tackles the return on assets, investments, and this is how we at Ipsos also understand the return on investments. And why cash flows? Because if we just look at ESG, again, from a brand perspective and from a consumer perspective, and we just look at top line and volume, and ESG might have an effect in driving an increase in top line, yes, and we can isolate that through consumers' behavior. So what is the impact on a consumer's buying decision as a consequence of a company investing in ESG? That's possible to isolate through research, but we need to, of course, assess the impact that ESG has on reputation, as Jason just said, and that is driving a better bottom line. That is influencing better costs, optimizing operational costs. So if I'm clearly positioned with ESG, I'm able to attract more talent. I'm able to retain more talent. I'm able to have a better relationship with communities, with suppliers, with society, with investors that typically are very important stakeholders. So when we expand the lens of ESG to encompass other stakeholders, then it makes much more sense, especially if we're discussing this for B2B companies, especially if we're discussing this for companies that operate in a commoditized environment where the product doesn't really matter. So why would ESG matter if the product doesn't really matter, if it's a commodity? If I can't differentiate the offer through product or through brand, yes, but I can differentiate my offer through reputation, and I can differentiate my offer through other stakeholders. So this is where ESG plays a more important role when we expand the perception on how we expand the lens through which we analyze the results of ESG. So when we look at ESG as an initiative, a business initiative, a financial asset that needs to generate financial return, we need to look at the impact that ESG has on clients, of course, on, as I just said, consumer behavior and influencing buying decision. And we know, we just seen that 64% of consumers are willing to spend more, that in the end of the day, they actually don't really, but starting to increase. And if we see this across different industries, financial industry, products, etc., of course, there's a percentage of importance of ESG on consumers' decision, but we can also isolate the effect ESG has on, again, communities of facilitating the operation of a given company, of talent, being attracted or being loyal to a company and remaining loyal to a company for a longer period of time because of the fact that they share values. The talent believes in the ESG initiatives that a company has. So this is how we need to establish the link from the initiatives through the impact that it has on clients, loyalty, usage, consideration, awareness, and all the other stakeholders, advocacy, trust, favorability, to establish then, to link this to financial forecasts and to future cash flow, which is a measure of the intangibles of a company. And we are able to say what is the final economic value generated by ESG investments, ESG initiatives. And that value is not on sales only, is not dependent on sales only, but it's the bottom line. So what is the economic value, or what percentage of the business value and the business valuation of a company is secured by ESG investments? And the valuation methodology that we apply is derived from a business valuation methodology, and it's the same monetary methodology that it's outlined in the ISO 10668 for monetary brand valuation. So typically when we value a business, when we value assets, we use the income approach. So what we could see the cost approach, so how much we spend spend in the past to build that asset, but that is not advisable because it doesn't reflect the efficiency of the way we spend our strategy, etc. So we need to apply the income approach, which is understanding future value. So the same thing that applies for evaluating a company, we understand future cash flows, and there's a risk associated to those future cash flows that typically is the risk of the industry, of the sector. What we do is we isolate the effect of the uplift, of the brand equity uplift as a consequence of ESG. So in the end, we're saying a percentage of consumers' decision, of talent's decision to work in a company, of communities, of any given stakeholders to operate and to relate to a company is driven by ESG. So that percentage we apply to future cash flows, and of course there's a risk. And the better positioned a brand is in terms of ESG, the higher the strength, the higher the equity, the lower the risk. So we adjust the discount rate. This is a corporate finance metric, of course, but we adjust that discount rate to bring everything to net present value. So the calculation is rather simple. It's not a black box, but what we're doing is we're understanding the effect on future cash flows as a consequence of ESG, and assessing the risk or the probability that the company has to perpetuate those ESG profits as a consequence of being very well positioned and having a better equity and therefore a lower discount rate. So this is a methodology. In the end, what we would see is the value of the initiative. So let's say we have an initiative that we need to, we're spending $20 or $10 million, and then we see the final value is 13, so that value is generating a positive ROI higher than 1. We are returning to the company more dollars than we used to invest in this particular initiative. So this is the one of the final outcomes, but more than being the final outcome, understanding what the value is. Once we're able to deconstruct what generates value, and from the inside out perspective and from the outside in perspective, understand, of course, what's important to clients, what's important to stakeholders, what our strategy is, what's our DNA, what we are equipped to do, what we love to do, what we could change. The sweet spot between these two analyses would give us the growth opportunities for ESG. And once we conduct that analysis and we know what generates value, what's driving value, we are able to simulate potential opportunities and arrive to a conclusion to what would make more sense to a company in terms of opportunity A, of opportunity B, of opportunity C, considering the financial impact that particular initiative will have on the business value. And this is how we use ESG ROI and ESG economics to prioritize strategy. So yes, it's an end, understanding the value generating and understanding if there's positive ROI, but it is also a means for strategy. it is also something that we would use to change the conversation with the boards of our companies, to change the conversation with our CFOs, because this is the language of the CFOs. In the end, we do understand, we marketing professionals, we do understand the importance of ESG, and CFOs and CEOs intuitively also understand that importance. But once we are able to change the conversation and incorporate financial metrics and use the same dialogue, the same language that they use, we can change the conversation to a more positive agenda and make better, more informed decisions about our ESG strategy. So in the end, it's all about understanding the uplift. It's not about understanding impact on sales. Again, of course, we could also measure impact on sales, especially those products and industries that are more impulse driven, but not all industries might have a complete correlation between investments and sales. So we need to look into the longer term, which is through brand uplift from ESG, right? We build a financial modeling, we can assess the economic benefit, we can assess the ROI, we can build even scenarios. What would happen if we increased our investment? Could we have even more return? Or even if I have an initiative that is generating positive return and I have two initiatives, what would happen if I use that same investment for initiative C? So I changed. I could have a change in my strategy, and I could potentially generate more return for the shareholders, for the company, and of course generating more return for society, for the environment, for the planet, because we are investing on ESG. So this is how we prioritize investments on ESG. So finally, to sum it all up, we have 4 key messages here. So is it possible? Does it generate financial value? Can I prove the return? Can I build a business case? Yes. ESG financial value should not only be measured, but also have its investments prioritized. Once I am able to understand and to isolate the effect, I'm able to run simulations and optimization scenarios in order to increase the return of that given investment. ESG then is about the world, prosperity, and people. It's not only about environment. We know that, most of us know that, but then again, when we ask many of us if we understand what it is, typically ESG is very heavy on the E and on the G, and we sometimes forget the S, which is about people, it's about diversity, it's about inclusion. Impact should be evaluated on a multiple stakeholder-centric approach and not only consumer approach. So this is not just about selling products. This is not just about driving top line. Of course, driving top line, we will increase our returns, but it's also about optimizing costs, having better relationships and securing relationships with other stakeholders to have a healthier business with improved costs of operation. And as I said, sales impact alone is insufficient to measure ROI. That is why we need to look into the longer term, and looking into the longer term does not necessarily mean that we cannot transform this into value, into a metric that is possible for us to assess, to understand, to discuss in the same language that the CFO and the board would be discussing. So this concludes my presentation. I'm going to invite Anna back in. I think I stopped showing the presentation as well, right?
Yes, you did.
So Anna, thank you so much. We have had a few conversations before. Anna leads the corporate communications area of Braskem. It's a very important, one of the largest resin producers in the world, and she came to us with a challenge. They were doing many interesting investments, and they intuitively knew that they were positive. And we built a model for them, for Braskem, and that help them make the decisions on what to prioritize. So I would love, Anna, if you could tell a little bit, please introduce yourself, introduce a little bit about Braskem, and we can discuss case.
Yes, thank you, Andre. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's also always a pleasure to talk about these ESG goals and communication as we are doing here in Braskem. Braskem is a petrochemical company. We had our headquarters here in Brazil, but we also have facilities in Mexico, United States, and Europe. So it's a global company. The challenges are as big as the company. And as you said, Andre, B2B companies, ESG is so important. For us, ESG is the point of the whole strategy. That's what I will talk about this. About 5 years ago, more than this, I think 6 years ago, we developed our ESG goals. We divide these in 7 dimensions, which are elimination of plastic waste, combating climate change, social responsibility and human rights, operational eco-efficiency, sustainable innovation, health and safety, and economic and financial results. And when we decide to make these goals, to make these ESG dimensions, establish the goals, we make a movement that the whole company must be included on that. Because it's such big challenge that we have to achieve, and all of us need to look for the same direction. So we start to look all our marketing. I'm responsible for marketing and communication, so we start to look for all our marketing actions and see if the actions that we did in the past bring value to these our ESG goals. That's when we start a study with Ipsos that help us to understand the 3 most important sponsorship that we have on that time, if they bring value to the company, and if they connect us with these ESG goals. The results are great. All of them bring value for us. That's the good point. But 2 of them are not so connected with our ESG goals. And we decide to move to a place that we really could talk with the society about plastic waste. Because as we said, we have 7 dimensions, ESG goals, but 3 are the most important ones: that elimination of plastic waste, climate change, and human rights. And the elimination of plastic waste for us, it's a big challenge because we will have to have technology to make more recyclable plastics. You have to make circularity because you have to think about the product when they start to be designed, that we call design for environment, that the product can be used and disposable in the right way and can be recycled. So we had lots of actions on that. And about environment education. Remember that here in Brazil, it's not a developed country. We have a huge challenge about the right to disposable. And we know that our responsibility to show the society how they can practice right consumption, conscious consumption, and right to disposable. So we start to look how we can connect with the society to live this message. It's not a good message to live because it has said, do this, do that, you are not doing the right things. And we study and see that the places that people are consuming plastic and they have fun, they are more open to receive messages, environmental messages. So we start to looking for music festivals, parks, and beaches.
Rock in Rio.
Yes, one of them is Rock in Rio. So we start, first of all, we start a sponsorship at Parque do Ibirapuera. It's a very important park here in São Paulo. It's Parque Ibirapuera is to São Paulo as Central Park is to New York, just to compare. It's a very known park. It's the most famous park in Brazil. It's very important in São Paulo. It's a huge park. And we develop a partnership with them that Braskem is responsible for all the waste of the park, the organic and not organic waste. And we have a place inside the park that we make the first filter about the waste, and then we direct everything to be recycled. Of course, the organic one go to one place, and the plastic, the papers, cans, and everything go to be recycled. This park has a goal to be zero landfill They used to have a goal until 2025. And with our support and our sponsorship, they are already zero landfill. So in 1 year, we established all the goals. We put there more than 500 can bins to the right disposable. And it's a huge movement, and everybody goes to the park, see Braskem there, understand what we are doing, and connect that if he disposed correctly the plastic, it could turn for him in a good way after being recycled. And then we start the music festivals. We have here in Brazil 2 very important music festivals each year. One is Lollapalooza, that is known in other places in the world. And the second is Rock in Rio, that it happens 1 year another. And now the same guys that do Rock in Rio are now doing a very big festival in São Paulo that it's called The Town, that will happen the next September, as big as Rock in Rio. So 1 year will be Rock in Rio in Rio de Janeiro, and the other year will be The Town here in São Paulo. Just to make about how big it is, it's about 100,000 people per day in the festival. Rock in Rio is 7 days festival. Here in The Town will be 5 days festival. What we're doing in this, why Braskem is there and what we are doing. We have some booths inside the festival, and for each plastic item that people threw away in our booth, they receive points. And when this have a number of points, he can get some gifts. For example, bags, pins, earphones, and things like that. The gifts are made from plastic. So the message that we want is when you throw away the right plastic, it turns for you in the right way. And what we want, that people go away from the festival and get in their day-by-day life. They know that the habit that they had inside their home or in
they're going to change. They're going to change their habits.
The mind, they change the habits. That's the environmental education that we want.
And
the first
one question I think that must be, sorry to interrupt, but on anyone's mind, that it's amazing that a B2B company sponsoring such an event where you're competing in terms of space with soft drinks, beers, and all the, I would say, fun brands in terms of experience, right? Of being fun in terms of product consumption. And I imagine the how hard it must have been to convince Braskem board to invest on such events when we heard, and I remember this when the commercial, I'm not going to sell more plastic because of this. And it's not only about selling, right? It's also about, well, you just said it, about society, but also about the employees that are really loyal to Braskem. This is another important aspect of the strategy.
I think all the stakeholders see value on that, because the employee is very proud about what company is doing, about plastic image and what we are showing to the society. Financial market love it. As you think, 3 years ago, we launched a huge global campaign about ESG goals. And for the first time, we launched the campaign in the first hand for the financial market. We did an event that is called ESG Day, and we show the communication campaign, the global communication campaign, the first time for the financial market, because it's so valuable for them. They see value in everything that we are doing. Yeah, we are a petrochemical company. We produce chemistry and plastic. Yeah. We must be responsible for these items that society look for them as, I don't know if they are good, plastic is not so good, what we are doing about plastic waste. So we must communicate and show what we are doing, our commitments, our goals, and our actions about that.
And the board now, so the case that you build for the board to make such an investment is now that they are convinced that there is return, because they're looking into other stakeholders, right? As you said, financial.
Of course, in the beginning it was tough to show them that the huge investment that we must do to make that. But they support, and now they know that it's the value of that, and they really support our actions and know that it's good. For example, I will tell this in the end of the presentation, but it's correct now. We have a reputation survey from 12 years from now about that. It's a huge survey that we connect all the countries, all the stakeholders. For the first time in the last second years, our reputation with society here in Brazil is going up. And it starts when we start to doing this kind of actions about the parks, about the music festival, because people see that Braskem is really committed to do the recycling process, to make a circular economy happens in the best way, to help people to understand the whole in the circular economic process. So society look for us and see, it's not a company that just produce plastic. They produce plastic, but they bring value, they bring safe, they bring everything that plastic could bring in a good way for people's life. And that's what we are talking, it's our purpose. And we can show our purpose to society, make this kind of actions to materializing what we really can do with plastic. And when you do this in a petrochemical company, what we could achieve is the social license to operate. It's not to sell more thermoplastic or more chemistry. It doesn't make big change in our sales numbers. But people look for us and see, I want this company near my home. I want this company in my country because it brings value to my country and they are responsible for what they do. So you get a social license to operate. That it's so important for us when you have facilities and you have everything near to the society. So
amazing.
Yeah, that's the big, in a very short way to explain, that's what we are doing. Yes, it's just 2 years from now, so I have some numbers, but I know that the numbers will be higher and better year by year.
No, and one thing you didn't mention, but I think it's interesting to say that you also conducted a study of awareness on the brands of Rock in Rio, and I think Braskem was right on the top there with, I don't know, Heineken or whatever, the other.
Yeah. No, there's two things in Rock in Rio that's important to tell. When you said about the other brands, it's so nice to see that the brands now looking for Braskem as someone that can help them to resolve a problem. So we make a partnership in Rock in Rio with Heineken, Coca-Cola, Braskem, and Natura. So we collect all the cups from Heineken and Coca-Cola, and we recycle these cups and bring this raw material to Natura. Natura is a cosmetic company in Brazil, is a very well-known cosmetic company, and sell this recycled plastic to Natura to make a packaging from their products. So we close the cycle inside the Rock in Rio. All the cups from Heineken Coca-Cola, we collect, recycle, and it transforms in a packaging or a Natura packaging. So after that, lots of companies, this brand, call us and said, "Oh, please help me. I'll go to a festival music. I don't want to see my cups in the floor. I don't want to see all the plastic issues that I need to package my goods in the place that they don't need to stay." So Braskem goes there and resolve the problem, recycling everything. That's the good partnership. So it's a way to connect with these big companies and say that if everybody goes together, the circular economy really happens and we can close the cycle.
Amazing. Anna, it's an amazing case. Congratulations. Very interesting. I think we are almost on time here. I think I would like to open up for questions and invite Jason back if you're there. So we can have some questions for the other audience. I'm sure I might have some very interesting case. Hey, Jason. Anything you see there?
Nothing yet here. Andre, based on those experiences and the work together, are there any other things that you think would be valuable that we dig a little deeper into in the few minutes that we have left?
Yeah, I think, well, from Anna's perspective, thinking from the client perspective, it's always, I think what she shared, the challenge to build a case for the board, right, Anna? I think if you could say what maybe an advice on what is important when you build that case in terms of ROI and you said reputation studies, what is important for decision making?
Yes, what we did to the board, we presented our strategic communication plan and show them how the plastic image is so. Everybody knows that the plastic image is so attacked nowadays. And see, if we just take care about because we always talk about plastic as plastic in the future, plastic that brings facility, brings innovation, transform the future. But we never talk about the plastic waste. The plastic that people see in the rivers, in the ocean, that the place that they not have to be there. When we start to talk with the board about this, that Braskem must talk about plastic waste and must have actions about environmental messages and talk with society about that, not be far away from that problem. When they know that if we connect with this issue and show society, yes, we produce plastic, but we are also responsible for push the circular economy. We are also responsible for connect society with this item. We are also responsible to connect the public, the governance and the public power to make this happen. They see Braskem as a responsible company, not just a petrochemical company that produces a lot of plastic and chemistry. That changed the game. Yeah. And when boards see that, they said, okay, let's do that. They see that the research, of course, what we did with Ipsos really helped us to make this movement. And the reputation survey also helped us a lot to see when you see we are growing with these issues in the right stakeholders that we are showing. The very important, very interesting point is even these parks, music festival and beaches are connected with the society. Our clients, financial markets, ONGs always call us and said, it's great what you are doing. It's nice to see Braskem doing this kind of movement. So we focus in the society, but all the stakeholders are proud or see value what we are doing because they know that is the important things that company must do. And the other companies as big as we told in the partnership in Rock in Rio also see in a solution for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Anna, we do have a question here. Are you able to share any detail about the level of value that was generated for Braskem that is not the result of increased sales?
One of them is what I said with society in Brazil. In the last, I think everybody, I don't know if everybody knows about petrochemical company. Petrochemical company is a company that when society look for them, they imagine something great, something that is not so ESG connected. The image that people has about chemical industry, it's not the best image that we used to have. So when we measure our reputation with society, it's a very challenging reputation because even every effort that you do, society look for you and said, I'm not sure that you are a good company. And when we start to do this kind of actions that really connect society in a way that it's not a communication campaign that we said, plastic is good, be conscious consumption and the right to dispose, but it's not something that you tell for the people. You make they experience something good in the moments that they are open to do that. When you are in the Sunday with your kids in the park, have a great time, and you see this message, you see the movement that you do in front of your kids to do the right thing, it connects you with what you really can make in your habits in day by day. When you are in a music festival with all these brands, all the things that we can do in a music festival, and you receive gifts if you do a right movement, you connect with something that it's great. This when I throw away the right way the plastic, it turns for me in a good way. So we know that in these magic moments that we call, that people are having fun, are having a great time with their friends, with the family, then they can connect more with this kind of messaging. It's not in a such traditional way as a communication campaign. And I just to connect, to show the answer, in the last 2 years, our reputation with society in Brazil is growing for the first time in the history.
I would just add that if it's fair to say that the value is in the social license, as you said, because the question is, if you don't look into sales, what are you looking at? You just explained that it's not even important to sell more plastic because they're not measuring that as a consequence of the initiative, but it's the social license, the value.
It's important to say that, Andre, that we could if sell less plastic, virgin plastic, because we have the recycled plastic also. So maybe we could start to sell more recycled plastic than the original one. And it's okay for us. It's okay. We have to sell what the society needs and what we are committed for.
Anna, I have a separate question. What are your thoughts about the anti-ESG movement that we're experiencing here in the United States? Are you experiencing similar in other markets, and what's your perspective on that?
As a global company, we see different levels of connecting with ESG issues where we are. The most connected one are from Europe. Okay, the European guys are much more connected. They ask more for us for recycled plastic, for bio-based. We have a bio-based plastic that makes for sugar cane. 70 or 80% of the sales from this plastic, this green plastic, is for European guys. So European always ask us in the first time for ESG goals. Mexico and Brazil are quite in the same page. They ask if they don't have to pay more. If I have to pay more for something that is environmental correctly, they don't pay more because it's a not developed country, so people don't have money to make this kind of options when they buy something. In the United States, it's very interesting, the movement that we are seeing there. Some years ago, people don't talk a lot about, for example, they don't want to buy the green plastic or the recycled one. And now this movement is start to growing in the United States. People are starting to talk about this and start to ask the companies to do more sustainable products.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions we have there, Jason? I think no.
That is everything I have for the moment. It looks like we're just about at time.
Yep. So Ellen is joining us to finalize. I would like to thank you again. Well, thank you, Jason, also for being with us. Your perspective is really helpful. And Anna, as always, we have been in a few conversations, and it's a very, very interesting topic. I see that the Braskem case, given that it's a petrochemical company that produces resins, that produces plastic, and it has this on its DNA, right? I heard this from the very first meeting we had, and we can feel this with the employees and with the change that Braskem is promoting. So amazing job. Congratulations.
Thank you for the participation. I really like to talk with you. Thank you for the opportunity, Jason and Andre.
Thank you.
Well, I also would like to thank Anna, Andre, and Jason for today's really interesting and thoughtful presentation. Thank you all for joining us. Do be on the lookout for a link to today's recorded presentation. I expect that will be emailed out in the next couple of days. However, in the meantime, there are handouts in the event control panel for you to read more about some of the research we shared today. Of course, we always welcome the opportunity to speak with you directly, so please feel free to reach out to us. That now concludes today's Ipsos webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.